Helen Clark, it was quite interesting, the story, how you saw this job. Tell us about it.
Well, I wasn't actually actively looking, but I was reading the international papers when I was in Europe in January. And I saw a tiny little snippet that said that the administrator of the UN Development Programme was retiring early. I knew the administrator from previous international links, and I thought, that's interesting. So when friends in London started saying to me, what are you going to do? I said, oh, well, there could be possibilities. I see, for example, that this position's vacant. And the general response was, you'd be terrific at that, why don't you have a go? And it rolled from there.
Well, you were probably one of the least favourite of the candidates initially. How did you pull it off?
They operated a very open selection process. I understand that about 80 applications came forward because they advertised in The Economist eventually, but also asked the member nations of the UN to put in names, and a number did. Now, I pitched it as being a leadership job, not a job for a technical expert at this time, because the world is facing so many crises, all of which hit the developing countries very, very hard, that I felt it needed high-level leadership, networking, political and communications skills, and that's the argument that's carried the day.
Well, this would be one of the first job interviews you've probably had in your life. How did you find it?
Never been for a job interview before, except with the New Zealand people at general elections and the people of Mount Albert in my own electorate. So yes, that was a novel experience, and I talked to a number of people before participating in the major panel interview in New York about just what would be expected.
How important is it for somebody in a position that you've now found yourself in terms of support from other countries?
Absolutely critical. Of course, to get that support you have to be a very credible candidate, but I was fortunate in having supporting me a very wide range of the world's nations, large and small. I had, of course, the support of our own government. These things are done on a bipartisan basis here and always have been, and I hope always will be. Prime Minister Kevin Rudd from the outset was very enthusiastic supporter, and that meant a lot to me and the candidacy. Prime Minister Gordon Brown was fantastic. The Norwegian Prime Minister, a personal friend, absolutely fantastic, and there are many such stories.
This particular job, I mean, nobody had really heard of it, I think, before, the development program. I mean, what does it mean to you in terms of assisting countries that are developing?
Well, in our world today, a lot of people live in conditions that we in New Zealand would find intolerable for one day, let alone all one's life. So it is an issue of equity and justice, issues we're mindful of in our own country, that we erected the welfare state around in the 1930s to deal with so that everybody could have a chance. That's really the mission you're taking to the world through the UN Development Programme, that development is freedom. It's the ability to participate, to have opportunity, to have control over your life, to have a decent life, to be able to do things with and for your children for a better future.
The development program has been in the headlines for sometimes for the wrong reasons in terms of corruption. Money isn't getting to where it's intended to get. How can you make a difference there?
I think people know that coming from New Zealand, which has been ranked as the first or second least corrupt country in the world, that I bring an absolute dedication to transparency and integrity and honesty in the organisations and institutions I'm responsible for. Now I'm sure, as is the case when you're Prime Minister of New Zealand, that somewhere down the food chain sometimes people do things that aren't right, and you've got to deal with that. But I think overall the organisation will be very, very sound, and there will be many people in it who've given their lives for exactly the cause of development.
In a personal sense, of course, it's a major upheaval for you. You're going to have to live in New York. How are you going to find living in the Big Apple?
Well, that's a huge change, and I guess I'll see it as camping there like I've camped for 27 years in Wellington, being an Auckland-based politician. So New York will be where the job is. I expect there'll be a reasonable amount of travel involved. I've obviously still got very close family here in New Zealand. My husband, with a major research team based at the University of Auckland, is not in a position to let everyone there down, so there'll be some commuting there. I have elderly parents celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary this year, so yes, it's important for me to be keeping in close touch with family.
So it'll be a bit of a commuting job for you, New York, Auckland?
Well, I certainly hope it's not going to be a year till I touch base home again. and I'll be hoping that Peter can come up and down a bit as his international commitments permit.
Of course, you're in the position that you are now because you were rejected by the public at the last election. I mean, is it with a tinge of sadness that you're where you are at the moment?
Well, every cloud has a silver lining, doesn't it? In a sense, had I been able to carry on, which was very much my first desire, I would have been 3 years older at the time of the next election. Heaven forbid if one had gone for a fifth go, would have been 65. So at my age now, at 59, this is absolutely the right thing for me to be doing, given that carrying on as PM wasn't an option.
You've been basically silent since the election. Why is that?
Because I've watched so many transitions from one Prime Minister to another. Some have been very dignified. I think of Jim Bolger, for example, going off to be ambassador in Washington DC, but some, as you recall, made rather a lot of noise from the sidelines or were still very actively involved. And I felt that I went with a lot of public respect, and I didn't really want to get back into hostilities as usual with people saying, oh, she's bitter because she lost. Actually, I had 9 incredible years in the job. Some of it was tough going, but it was overall an enormous privilege, and I wanted to go out on that high note.
In terms of that bitterness, politics is a brutalising arena, and you've certainly been the subject of a lot of brutality, for want of a better word. How have you weathered that over the years? Has it been difficult?
Well, I think pretty well. I mean, you start from the assumption that obviously there's usually at least half the population that hasn't voted for you. So, you know, the prima facie, that's half that may be looking to find fault. But on the other hand, I think I enjoyed quite a lot of respect across the political system. Sure, you come in for a lot of flack, but that's the price of being at the top.
In terms of that brutalising arena, are there any particular incidents that stand out in your mind? I mean, you know, your family's been brought into rows before, you've been accused of all sorts of things yourself before.
Well, I think the most irritating thing is when your spouse is attacked, and that's a not uncommon device for people who are trying to get at you, and you tend to be very protective of your family.
Any recriminations as a result of what happened at the election?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I regard as one door closes and another door will open, and this door's open for me pretty early on.
John Key backed you for this job quite publicly. How do you think he's doing as Prime Minister?
Well, I've really kept right out of commenting publicly at all on what's happening. People can take it as read that I'll be a lifelong member of the New Zealand Labour Party. I very much want to see a Labour MP following me in Mount Albert, as I followed Warren Freer, who put in 34 years as local MP. I very much hope for the election of a Labour government in the 2011 election, but I'm standing back from active involvement and comment myself.
What'll the legacy be of Helen Clark to politics?
That's for others to judge, isn't it? But obviously people will look at, first woman to lead a political party to victory in New Zealand, and I think they'll reflect that from 1999 to 2008 New Zealand became a rather different and I think better country in many respects.
Do you sort of prioritise your achievements? Is there one that stands out that you're particularly proud of?
I think what stood out for me was the incredibly low unemployment that we enjoyed for so many years. That gave a lot of people new hope, new opportunity, the dignity of work, being able to put food on the table for their families themselves. We put a huge emphasis on employment.
This job that you've got, Helen, is the highest that a New Zealander has ever risen to in terms of diplomacy. Do you feel humbled by it?
For sure, and I wouldn't even have a possibility of aspiring to such a job if I hadn't had the incredible opportunities New Zealand's given me, going back to really cradle to the grave, social security, education, healthcare, opportunity to participate in politics, be a long-serving Member of Parliament, Prime Minister. All of those things have helped make me what I am today.
This job is a 4-year job. Any aspirations for higher office, like the Secretary-General's job?
Simply focused on doing the best I can over the next 4 years. At that point I'll be 63 and I'll see how I feel.
Do you believe there's a lot of life in Helen Clark yet?
For sure. A lot of skiing, a lot of tramping, a lot of concerts, a lot of things to do.
So is this a chapter of your life that you're particularly going to savour, do you believe?
Well, I savour all of them. I figure life is short and you never know how long you've got, so you've got to take every day as an opportunity and a privilege. That's the way I approach life.